This is a story about my first job in the Outback on a wheat and sheep farm. Bert Booth was about 5'10". On his head, he wore an old digger's slouch hat, which was covered in oil and sweat stains. The crown of the hat had two large holes in the top front crease from taking it on and off. His face was creased and weather-worn brown. It had long, deep lines all over it from years of working in the sun and the heat. He had a large hooked nose, just like an eagle. At each side of the nose were two small slits that I guessed were his eyes. Above the eyes were big, bushy eyebrows that grew in all directions except straight. He had dirty grey whiskers. His clothes were old ex-army dark khaki. The pants were woolly and the shirt was cotton, and over that he wore the khaki battle dress jerkin. On his feet were a pair of big rubber-soled work boots that were covered in red dust. Before I sat down, I dusted the seat of his ute with me hand, and when I looked at it, me hand was a dirty red colour. "Get in, mate. A bit of fucking dust won't hurt you. Don't forget to slam the door, or she'll fly open on you." Bert Booth was not a pleasant-looking character, and already I could feel he was mean-spirited, not at all like Bill Defoe. So I just sat there looking out of the window. The old ute picked up speed as it went along the bush road. Red dust flew up behind as we drove along. The dirt road was covered in potholes and corrugation. The old ute banged and rattled so much I thought it was going to fly to pieces before we arrived at his property. At long last, old Bert spoke. "You see all this mallee country? Well, we're in the process of clearing it all, so we've got some more country to sow the wheat notes down." "That's great," I said as I sat there looking at him. Then I started to think about clearing mallee country. Maybe I'll learn to drive a big bulldozer or a crawler. That will be great. As we drove along in silence, a few kangaroos hopped across the road in front of us. "Oh, look, there's some kangaroos," I said. "Plenty of those bastards out here. They're a bloody nuisance, those roos. One roo will eat as much crop as 10 sheep in one night." "How do you stop 'em doing that?" I asked. "Lad, we shoot the bastards with shotguns. We wait till it's dark, then we go out in the ute with a good spotlight. Soon as we pick 'em up in the spot, we let the bastards have it. Boom! Hop out and open that gate, and don't forget to chain it back up. I don't want those sheep to get mixed up with the others. I just finished drafting 'em." After a long drive through his paddocks, we finally came to his property. "This is a house paddock, and over there behind those pines is a house." The old ute pulled up in the red, dusty yard in front of his one-story house. The house had a chain-link fence around it, which kept the stock out of the vegetable garden. Next to the house was a couple of large water tanks that sat on two tall wooden platforms. The front door of his house opened, and a porky, middle-aged woman came out. "This is the missus," said Bert. "Pleased to meet you," I said. "I'm so glad you're here. You'll be a lot of help for Bert. We've been waiting for a new boy for about 6 months now." "You'll be staying over there in that shed. Take your gear over there, and lunch will be served in about half an hour. The missus will ring the cowbell when it's ready." Bert's wife was at least 50 years old. Even she was ex-army, like his clothes. She used to be a nurse in England, and when the Second World War started, she was sent to Australia to look after the wounded troops. Bert had met her after the war, and once married, he brought her out to the bush. She had straight grey hair, which was chopped off above her shoulders. Her face was lined just like Bert's. Under her nose and on her chin, she had almost as much hair as Bert did. She also had a small dark mole on her face, out of which grew 5 or 6 long grey hairs. She had a bust like a Jersey milking cow, which hung down to her waist, just about. Her waist was long gone, and her ass was about 1.5 axe handles wide. Her legs were covered in dark stockings, and she still wore her nurse-type shoes. I picked up my 2 cases and headed over to the shed where Bert had pointed. From the outside, the shed was made up of corrugated iron, just like the locked shed at Bagooney Station. The door was a very faded blue with paint peeling and flaking off all over it. I put my cases down and turned the warm round handle. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a small room about 9 feet by 7 feet. In one corner was an old rusty bed frame with an old stained flock mattress on it. Next to that was an ancient cupboard with 3 horizontal drawers in it, and in another corner was a small wardrobe with a long stained mirror on the door. The floor was covered in cheap oilcloth that had been patched together. There were still large torn holes in it, as if someone had run out of patches. The small window was almost impossible to open, and a faded curtain hung down each side of the frame. The walls of the hut were not lined, so already I was noticing the heat as I stood there. This place is nothing but a dump, I thought. Maybe everyone lives like this in the bush. I put my thin bush coat over the back of the only broken chair in the place, and then put my 2 cases under the bed and sat on the edge of the rickety chair, surveying the stained mattress. I hope no one's pissed on that, I thought to myself as I stared at it in disbelief. I decided to turn it over to see how the other side was, but it looked like it had been turned over on many previous occasions. I pulled out one of my cases and found a couple of clean linen sheets, which I promptly covered the mattress with. Then I knocked all the dust out of the pillow and dropped it into a brand new pillowcase. The foisty smell still emanated out of the pillow, so I gave it a couple more whacks with the flat of my hand and threw it into place. The corners of the small room had large cobwebs grown across them, but I decided I'd knock them down later. I kicked off my good shoes, which were now covered in red dust, and very carefully lay on my back on the rickety old iron-framed bed. I lay there, staring at the corrugated iron roof, until I heard the sound of the cowbell ringing. When the cowbell stopped ringing, I made my way across the dusty yard to the main house. Old Bert was standing under the tank stand at a small homemade table with an old aluminum dish full of brown water, washing his face and neck. After he finished, he threw the dirty water over the fence into the vegetable patch. After you're washed up, throw the water in the veggie garden. You'll have to learn to conserve water out here, mate. She's been a real dry summer this year. We've only had a few points of rain over the last 7 months. Use that tap over there. That's the washing water. It's pumped up from the dam by the big windmill next to it. When you finish, come on inside for a bite to eat. The missus has got the tucker out on the table already, so hurry up before the flies carry it away." I put the battered old dish onto the tap and turned the tap with a pair of old pliers that were sat on the stone next to it. The water came out a dirty reddish-brown colour, and it was quite warm. The square, rough block of soap that was sitting on the old wooden table was as hard and scratchy as hell. No matter how hard I rubbed with the soap, no lather appeared. After I finished, I put my shoes where Bert had left his and walked inside. To my surprise, Bert and Kay's house was very clean and tidy inside, and the furnishings, although not new, were in really good shape. 3 large pieces of cold mutton were waiting for me at the table as I sat down. Next to the mutton was a couple of medium-sized potatoes, and alongside those were 3 tomatoes. Old Bert was already eating as I sat down. "Dig in, mate, and if I was you, I'd put a heap of salt on that mutton, 'cause if you don't eat a lot of salt out here in the bush, you'll end up as sick as a mangy dog." I put some more salt on my meat and reached for a thick piece of hand-cut bread. I put the normal amount of butter on it, and before I could finish, old Bert said, "Christ, mate, go easy on the butter. That's got to last a few days before I make another batch." After that, Kay Booth asked me a few questions about my life. So I told her about Yorkshire, my dad's farm, and Ellen's Silver Prize band. As I finished talking, old Bert said, "Well, I'm off back up the paddock. You can start work tomorrow morning. Have a look around the place this arvo, and don't leave the house paddock. I don't have time to go looking for a new chum who's got himself bushed in the first afternoon." Back outside, old Bert hopped in his decrepit ute and drove away out of sight. I decided to investigate the house paddock, so I took off in the direction of the big windmill. There were burrs and saffron thistles all over the place, and the ends of the thistles were so sharp that they went straight through my thin work jeans and stuck in my legs. The dam was quite large, and as soon as I got close to it, a group of wild wood ducks flew off up into the air. I walked up the small bank and stood there, looking at the brownish, murky water. Just then, a mob of wild sulphur-crested cockatoos landed in a big gum tree and started to squawk. They were the largest parrots I'd ever seen. They had jet black eyes and a big yellowish plume on top of their heads. A few of them flew out of the gum tree and landed at the water's edge to take a drink. They did not seem to mind me standing there as they stuck their beaks in the muddy water, then put their heads up to swallow it. A few moments later, a large flock of budgerigars landed next to the sulphur-crested cockies and took up their drinking positions. When they had drunk their fill, they all flew back up into the pine and gum trees, which held plenty of shade for them. I noticed some old sheds at the bottom end of the house paddock, so I slowly walked in that direction. The sun was already hot now, and the bush flies were a real nuisance. The more I swished them away from my eyes, the more it seemed to encourage them. There was broken down, rusty old machinery lying all over the place. Most of it, I guess, was left over from the old horse-drawn days. Some of the old sheds housed bags of seed wheat, and the others were tractors and combine sheds. At the far end of the paddock was what smelled to me like a shearing shed. I also saw a few half-full bales of wool laying open in one corner. I spent most of the afternoon walking around to familiarize myself with the place. When I got back to my tin hut, I noticed just across the way a couple of large logs, so I went over to check it out. When I got closer, I saw what it was. Old Bert had split a large log straight down the center, and the white ants had eaten the whole middle of the log away. Bert had dug a small hollow in the ground and placed the half-hollow log over the top of the hole. At the back of the log was a square piece of corrugated tin that he'd bashed into the hard ground. The tin sealed up the back end. At the front was a 2-foot metal stake with a dog chain welded to it. What an ingenious idea, I thought. The dogs can go down inside the hole into the cool earth during the day when it's hot. The dog kennel looked like a natural den, which would have made them feel real comfortable. I spent the rest of the day putting a few work clothes that I would need into the old cupboard. And after another meal at old Bert's house, I went to bed early, so I'd be raring to go in the morning. I was up before the hot sun next morning, waiting for old Bert to come out of the house. He was up bright and early and walked across the dusty yard to where I was sitting on the small step of my shed. "G'day! We've got a big day ahead of us today, so we'd best get cracking. There's a couple of old bikes in that shed over there. Grab the old black one and pedal down the road to that bottom paddock. You'll see the milking cows down there, and we'll get started on them." I found the old bike, leaning against the shed wall, right where he said it would be. The bike was in worse condition than my old bike in England. I turned it around and blew the red dust off the seat and pushed it outside. Old Bert was nowhere to be seen now, so I threw my leg over the bike and pedaled down the dirt track to where he said the cows would be. It was very difficult to pedal the bicycle on the dirt track, because as soon as the front wheel hit a hole, which was filled up with bull dust, the bike came to an abrupt halt. At one hole, the front wheel stopped dead, and I shot off the seat and nearly ruptured myself on the crossbar, swearing away in my newfound Aussie language. When I reached the gate that old Bert had described to me, I got off my bike and undid the chain. The large tubular steel gate opened back on its own. I pushed my bike through and stood there looking for the cows. They were really hard to spot because they were grazing way off in the middle of a 500-acre paddock. The paddock was thickly overgrown with 4-foot-high saffron thistles, so I just sat on the bike, wondering how I was going to reach them. There was no other way that I could see except to ride through the thistles. 20 feet into the paddock, I was cursing and yelling as the hard, dry thistles stuck through my thin work jeans and into my soft legs. "Fuck this for a joke," I thought to myself. "At this rate, it's going to take me all day to get those cows in." I turned the bike around and pedaled back to the side of the fence. When I got off the bike, I pulled my jeans down and saw 10 to 15 small, sharp barbs sticking out of my legs. After I'd removed them, I pulled the rest out of my jeans. When I pulled my jeans back up, there were still a couple of places I'd missed getting the thorns out, but I tried to forget about it and pedaled back up towards the house. A couple of thorns scratched at my soft white legs the whole way back. When I eventually got back to the yard, old Bert said to me, "What happened to the cows?" "They're right out in the middle of a thistle paddock." "So you just left them there?" "Course I did. What else am I supposed to do?" Now he got really angry, and I could see his meanness come up to the surface. "You useless fucking stupid pommy bastard," he yelled at me. Go and get my fucking bike out of that shed. After I came back with his bike, he jumped on it and started to pedal real fast down the same dirt track. Come on, you useless pommy bastard! What the fucking hell do you think I'm paying you 3 quid a week for if I've got to get my own cows in? I was really quite scared by now, so I kept my mouth shut and tried to keep up with him as best I could. When we got down to the paddock gate, old Bert rode straight through the gate, headlong into the thistles he pedalled. After a few yards, I stopped my bike, 'cause by this time my legs were burning with thistle stings again. Get back on that fucking bike, you useless bastard, he roared. They're pricking my legs. You fucking useless pommy, you're as soft as shit, you little bastard. If you don't get back on that bike, I'll have you deported back to England, where you bloody well came from. It's all right for you. You've got thick pants on. These blue jeans of mine are paper thin. Yeah, you're nothing but a whinging pommy bastard, he roared again as he pedalled across the thistle paddock. By this time, I could take no more. The shock of the tin shed, the lack of human warmth, was too much for this 15-year-old boy from Yorkshire to take. I broke into tears and pedalled the bike back up the dirt track. When I reached the house, Kay Booth was throwing some feed to the chooks. I dropped the bike to the ground and headed straight for the tin shed, where I lay on my bed, and I proceeded to cry my eyes out. After a while, Kay came over and knocked on the door. Are you all right, Richard? Go away. I don't want to talk to you. Let me in, Richard. Go away and leave me alone, I said between sobs. Half an hour later, I heard Bert coming up the track with the milking cows. A few minutes later, I heard Kay talking to Bert. And a few minutes after that, she was knocking on my door again. Open the door, Richard. The tears had dried up by now, so I got off the bed and slid the wooden bolt back to open the door. She came in the room with a rather worried look on her face. You'll have to forgive Bert. He's lived and worked in the bush his whole life, and sometimes he forgets you're only a boy. He's a real mean old man. It's not that he's mean, Richard. I know he really likes you, like a son, but he's not got a lot of patience. If he likes me like a son, I'm glad I'm not his son. Go over to the milking shed. I've had a word with him, so he'll be all right now. There was not much choice in the matter, and I was scared he'd have me deported. So I walked over to where he was milking the cows. As I walked past the big pen, I saw a dead, skinned fox laying, half-eaten, in the mud. And all the small piglets had lost their curly little tails. The crows had pecked them off and eaten them. When I climbed over the wooden fence, Bert said, Yeah, there you are, mate. Can you milk a cow? Yes, my dad showed me how to do it. Good. At least you can do something. Come over here and milk this one, and be careful. She's a kicker. Make sure her leg's tied back like that, or she'll put her foot in the bucket of milk. The teats on the cow's bag were really small, and it made milking her very difficult. But as soon as he could see I'd done it before, he said to me, Your job's to bring the cows in and milk 'em 6 days a week. I'll do it on your day off, which is Saturday afternoon, and all day Sunday. That's the end of this first section of working on Bert Booth's property, which was about 12 miles out of Lake Kajeligo.